Uh, Welcome to Rasa Office Hours with me, Rachel, and Vladimir, who goes by Vova. So if you're wondering who Vova is, it's Vladimir. Unless you prefer I refer to you as Vladimir, but it feels a little bit weird. Yeah, do you want to introduce yourself really quickly to folks on YouTube? And I am a little nervous because I don't see the stream. Okay, it just started.
I can
Hi.
see the stream, so it seems to be working. Yes, my name is exactly Vladimir Vova. It's actually exactly the same names, so whatever anyone prefers. I'm a senior machine learning researcher at Rasa. I'm been with Rasa for quite some time. I think nearly 3 years now. And please keep in mind when you're asking questions that I'm a researcher. So if you ask questions about development, deployment, or something like that, I might not be the best person to answer them. So if you have questions about algorithms, how they work, our research features, and so on, please welcome. Yeah, what else? I don't know, any more introduction?
One thing, storm going on, so if you suddenly disappear, it's probably due to electrical stuff. Okay. All right. So we do have a couple questions already asked that we can go over really quick. So Kumar wants to know, I'm trying to build a Rasa chatbot that retrieves information from a database. I've seen a tutorial on connecting Rasa with the database. So this is one that I did in the live coding. How did I make the database files? I used a command line utility to convert a CSV file to a SQLite. I'm like 98% sure it's SQLite. And it was either command line, I think it was command line, but I think you can also do it in Python because SQLite is built in. So that's how I did it. And I just like Googled converting a CSV to a SQLite file and then followed a tutorial. So that's what I'd recommend you do. It was sort of like a stand-in for if you had like a larger database of your own. All right. And we have a multi-part question from Andrea. I'm trying to build a purchase dialog that allows the user to buy items in different quantities. For example, I would like to buy some apples and 5 bananas. Sure, how many apples did you want? Buyer, 3. Seller, anything else? Buyer, yes, 2 oranges. Seller, that's money. I would love to use entity groups and Rasa 2 forms for this. The entity groups are working most of the time, but I'm not sure if the forms can help me at all, or if I should try a different approach. Here are the 2 challenges I'm facing. Number 1, the user can provide more than 1 entity group per utterance. Yeah, I did notice that in the little example dialog. And number 2, the bot needs to ask for any missing information, e.g. quantity, in any of the entity groups. Yeah, do you have any suggestions here? I know what I do, but it feels a little hacky. So if you have a better suggestion.
Yeah, a little bit of hack might be necessary because first of all, separating fruits from, I don't know if you need to do it, if you need to separate fruits from, for example, vegetables, which is quite tricky because, well, you know, it's an artificial thing and fruit, it's impossible to generalize. You know, if you provide a number of fruits and you don't provide mango, then the algorithm will not know that mango is either fruit or vegetable.
For entity extraction.
For entity. So it's a bit tricky in that sense because you might need to, unfortunately, enumerate all of them. I don't know how many fruits are there. And another thing, yes, I do think that forms actually, well, it depends whether you are, depends what is the question, sorry, what is the plan. If it is a multi-question kind of thingy, then I would suggest to recommend the forms because then you have the capability to manually kind of like to create a custom validate function and then take a look at what actually was extracted on each actual phrases and maybe kind of figured out what how to fail gracefully or how to whether extracted information is correct and so on and so on. Like a simple whether the number is actually a number, right? If it's more than 0 and so on. So So I think forms is actually would be. I also would start with form.
Yeah, and given like the specific way that this task is set up, what I would do is actually have a very small form. So the form is just look up the item. I'm assuming if someone's purchasing something, there's some sort of database backend that has, you know, the widgets you're selling and like how many are in stock and stuff like that. So I would have a very small form that only looks up, asks for the item and then the quantity. And what I might do is like loop through that form if you've extracted multiple entities. So I'd run it once for the first half of the utterance and then once for the second half of the utterance, and then condition running it on like making sure I get through all my entities using some sort of rule. Do I know how I would write that rule right now off the top of my head? No. I think another benefit, in addition to being able to do, you know, like checking that the numbers are numbers, like Boba mentioned, is that you can like make sure that that's something you have in stock, do like, you know, more businessy stuff as part of your form validation to be like, oh, sorry, we're all out of pineapples. Do you want a mango instead? That sort of thing. So yeah, that's what I do. I think it's going to take a little finagling if you want people to be able to make, you know, a arbitrary number of requests per utterance and make sure that you validate each of them. But that's what I would do. It feels a little bit hacky.
I mean, it's okay. Something I would like to point out that there is no best or correct solution usually. There is a solution, there is one solution, and there is another solution. And for some people, one solution might be better than the other solution. And then it's also sometimes one solution might become another solution in some sense. I just would suggest, instead of trying to overthink it, just like try to build something that is workable, that you can talk to it. And then from there, kind of find the next steps and so on. So there is really, try not to think too much to, okay, what is the best solution now that I have this task?
If it's dumb and it works, it's not dumb. That's my engineering motto.
Yeah, especially here. And then you like, if you find it dumb, then you can re-engineer it later, but at least we'll have started from something.
Yeah. So I hope that helps, Andrea. That's what I would do. John says, hey guys, how do you conduct engineering interviews? Do you stick with the standard whiteboard algorithms and the structure approach? How do you assess engineering skills and fitting into your culture?
I'm researcher. I don't know about engineering interviews, sorry.
Yeah, I also don't know, but actually let me check something really quick. I might have a good resource I can point you to, but I want to make sure that it's actually available. I'm not on the engineering team.
Sure what is, sorry.
Oh, I just said I'm not on the engineering team.
I'm not sure what is meant by standard whiteboard algorithms. Yeah. In the research team, we have a take-home task. I guess I can say that. About engineering, I think so as well, but I don't know the.
Yeah, so right now I'm just on the careers page, which is rasa.com/careers, and seeing if we have additional outward-facing information. We don't. I would say if you have applied for a role, I would ask for more information from your contact during the application process. We do try very hard to make it not awful, right? Like a very inclusive process that genuinely helps people decide whether they thrive or else or not. Naive Learner says, please suggest, how do I implement the user interface for a Rasa chatbot? I have implemented one using Anaconda. Again, I think not the best group to ask that of, unfortunately. I do know there is a React widget called Chat Room that can build on top of Rasa, and there's a couple of people who have built different widgets that you will connect to a Rasa bot that you can embed in your own webpage. And I would probably recommend that over building it from scratch. But I'm very much not a front-end person.
Yeah, it's probably not the best audience to ask this question. Sorry.
Come back next week when. So next week is going to be Karen, and I don't know off the top of my head. I know she has like a lot more DevOps experience than I do. I think she's got more front-end experience too, so she might be a better person. Yasmin has a question that I think Vovo will be able to answer. Can you please explain some of the diet parameters? So some of them are hidden layers, max relative position, go through these one at a time, random seed, use sparse input dropout, and use dense input dropout. So let's start with share hidden layers.
Yeah, so diet algorithm is a dual encoder, the sense that it encodes both input, or in this case user text, and labels, in this case intent, into the same space through the different neural networks. And depending on the other parameters that not mentioned here, something like share hidden units and so on and so on, but you configure so that these two neural networks will be exactly the same in terms of architecture. And then the share hidden layers parameter, it can be true or false, means that whether we will share weights between the label network and input network. It's actually a bit of a legacy parameter because it was introduced before diet into embedding time classifier. When we have two feed-forward neural network, you can configure diet so that it will be, I think somewhere in the docs we have the config how to do it. And then you can use the share hidden layers, but I wouldn't recommend to use it anymore. It's a bit of a legacy parameter. We sometimes use it to do some research stuff, but it is outdated in this. Max relative position is related to, so there was a paper, unfortunately I forgot the name, it was released a year after the attention is all you need paper. It's the modification of the transformer, like as we know, the relative embedding, like the positional embeddings that I added inside transformer are not very effective to capture the positions. And what in this paper the author suggested is to introduce additional trainable vectors that would capture the relative position in the transformer. So you kind of create additional encoding that is exactly the same, you know, 1 token from 2 token from 3 and so on and so on. And this max relative position is like how far you want to go. I think the default is 5 or something. Remember exactly, but it means that you will create, like, for each previous and next positions, like for the window of 5, and the rest will be considered as like far away as additional vectors, let's say. And this case might help to capture, so like to the network to be able to, instead of just condition the attention on the value, also condition attention on the position. That like whatever is 3 steps before, pay attention to that. Doesn't work as smoothly, but depends on the data set, depends on the task, but sometimes actually works miracles. Yeah, so there is 3 additional one to this max relative position, like use relative vectors and use relative keys, I think, and use relative key values, something like that. This is the one. Random seed is a random seed, like training a random network, neural network is a stochastic process in some sense. It depends on there is a lot of random initialization. For example, the weights are initialized randomly, and if you want to 100% repeatable results, you need to fix the random seed. Otherwise, every time you train, you will have slightly different results. And yes, so the random seed is the usual fixing random seed as
and I would say that it's not a parameter. I would not recommend tuning your random seed. Just like pick one and use it.
Yes, I would actually recommend not using it. Because, funny enough, in my opinion, if from training to training you get drastically different results, with different random seeds, it means that there is something wrong with your training data. It means that it's highly unstable and probably confusing.
Yeah.
Why sometimes it learns one thing, sometimes it learns another thing. So I would say that how stable your algorithm is relative to different random seeds is one of the metrics, like how to figure it out whether your algorithm, whether your trained model performs good or bad. It's not very concrete, so it's very hard to measure it, so to say, but like it's like hunch-wise, I would say this is a good indicator. The next one, use sparse input dropout and use dense input dropout. So the thing is that there is a video algorithm whiteboard that about the diet, right? And if you didn't watch it,
I think.
Definitely recommend to watch it. And there, diet is explained, and you can see that diet has sparse input and dense input. So with sparse input is that whatever comes from your count vector featureizer, basically an indicator whether a certain word is present or not. And the dense input is something like a word embeddings and so on. And the thing is that we cannot simply take them and concatenate because they're different nature. One is sparse tensor, another one is dense tensor. So what we do, we add additional, we call it sparse to dense transformation to kind of create this virtual embedding, so to say, to transform the sparse input and dense input. And these dropouts basically regulate whether before the dense input, during training, you drop some of the sparse inputs, and after you convert it to dense, you also either you drop some of this dense input. Again, we kept it there because we performed experiments whether it helps or not, and we found out that on average it helps. So we can try to tune it on, but I wouldn't expect large differences. I would leave it. If you do not feel comfortable what they're doing, just like keep the defaults.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that answers your question, Yasmin. And like hopefully, for most cases, diet should work well. For English data, kind of out of the box. So you shouldn't need to tune it too much. Fingers crossed. Tuba says, I am facing a few issues related to form customizations. Can I share with you? I'm scrolling a bit down to see what the issues are. It says core training was skipped as no valid domain is defined. Can you please help me fix this error? Although NLU is training perfectly.
Well, I guess the domain.yaml file, there is something wrong in there.
Yeah, you might also, the NLU is training, so it's probably not that you're in the wrong directory, but I would double check your domain file and that it is following sort of.
I think you forgot maybe double dot somewhere. There's like slots as a dictionary. There's minus somewhere. It's like it's YAML format, and if YAML reader cannot read the YAML format, then it rises there. So most probably something like something is with the domain file.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up the domain file docs. I'm in the Rasa X docs. That'll do it. I was like, why can't I find it? Let me that up real quick. So I would go through. Everybody can see the browser. So I would go through your domain file and just double check that your formatting is correct. And one that gets me is that these are all plural. And even though there's only one entity here, you still have to call this entities. So that's an error I run into sometimes. Yeah, so I double check it. All right. Naive Learner says, I've learned Python. Do I need to learn JavaScript too? Thanks for the reply. A Naive Learner was one who asked about the front end. I mean, it depends on what it is that you need to accomplish and your career goals. If you want to be a front-end developer, like probably. But if you don't, like, try searching for open source solutions for what it is that you want to use, and then use things that already exist where the license works for your use case, and be efficient. So that's my my general recommendation. I'll say I don't know JavaScript. I am not my area of expertise. You know JavaScript? No. Christian says, why is the dialogue manager superior to conversational states? So this is a great question. Why don't we use state machines to figure out what to say next in a conversation?
What is why? What or why? Sorry. The question is dialogue manager superior.
I'm guessing that that's a typo and it should be why.
It should be why. Okay. Why don't it's what do you mean superior? The thing is that state machines are brilliant, and rules in some sense, like, and you need state machine to define some, in my opinion, like backbone of a dialogue, and that's why we introduced the rule policy. However, as we know, state machines are brilliant only when you have 2 or 3 states or something. As soon as you start to use them, they grow into a huge pain and it becomes completely unmaintainable. And that's actually the only reason why state machines are bad, is because at some point, adding something is nearly impossible. Because you cannot enumerate, even sometimes you cannot enumerate all of it, right? In some sense, the dialog manager is nothing more than a state machine. It creates a state machine. We just don't know what kind of state machine it is, right? So we provide its training data, and then we train, let's say, TED policy. And in the end, whatever the output of the TED policy is a state machine in some sense, because it's the deterministic thing that chooses the next action. The only thing is, we don't really know why it chooses the certain actions and so on, but actually it is traceable. For example, we are adding this attention PR where you could be able to see where Ted looked and so on and so on. But the main advantage of it is you can just add another story that is, first of all, is not a hard contradiction, and we have a test for this as well. You can validate your story whether it is a hard contradiction to your previous stories or not. So this really helps. You don't need to verify anything. You don't need to, you just add one story and you say, and it says, here is a contradiction, right? So this is brilliant thing to use, and then you can figure it out whether it is what you want, and either you modify the old ones or you modify the new ones, and then you just train another policy and just it works or doesn't work, but at least you have this scalability. And the cool thing about our approach is that you can still benefit from a state machine. So if you have a concrete rules that you want to always execute, you can use a rule policy, you create these simple rule snippets. And nowadays we are preparing PPR where if you don't have your rules inside your stories, they will be hidden from your training data, from your machine learning policy. So you have a rule, chat, whatever, that basically is context independent and should always happen. That will not see it at all if you didn't provide it in your training story. If you provide it in your stories like ML training, then it will see that it happened. And it allows the huge flexibility. And you see all your rules is one thing. Again, we have a tool that a rule policy automatically evaluates whether your rules contradict each other or not, which makes it very, sometimes it makes it trickier, but actually makes it very powerful, because as soon as you introduce new rule, you can be safe that, well, it is okay. And I would say the main superiority comes for scalability. And hopefully, we'll probably not there yet, but hopefully at some point you will not need to know, why certain things is there. You just like provide the new story. If you want your bot behave like that, you train your algorithm. So say this.
And I think, like, just very practically from a developer standpoint, with a state machine, you have to accurately guess. I just realized I didn't put your title in here. I was also a doctor. Sorry. You have to accurately guess all of the things that people are going to want to say in the order that they're going to want to say them in. And with a dialogue manager, you don't, right? You provide examples, and based on those examples, your system sort of learns what's likely to happen next. So I certainly,
Yeah, one more thing, and it's also like exactly what you said. It also allows you to reuse the data that your users generated. So you don't need to also take a look at your previous conversations and create a state machine from it. You can just copy paste your story and to your training data if that's a behavior that you want to capture. Maybe fix it if your bot made a mistake, and you already have the new example. Like the amount of work that you as a developer need to do, in my opinion, is significantly less.
Yeah. It should work better and be easier to make is the very short answer to that. All right, so Trooper, wow, we're a little bit behind. Lots of questions. Currently, I am overfitting the sound event detection model. Any guidance will be useful to improve it. I'm getting 90 plus train and validation. Train and validation is stuck, 0.9 train, validation is stuck at 0.8 using EffectNet V5 as a backbone. I'm doing some augmentation such as Gaussian noise, pet mix, etc., but it's not helping. Sound event detection. I don't think that's a Rasa thing.
Yeah, I don't think this is the right place to ask questions. Sorry.
Yeah, I would say if your your validation is that much lower, then your training stop several epochs before they start to diverge. Would be my general guidance in that situation. All right. Noodle says, an off-topic question, can Doc start a series on this channel explaining all the complex machine learning algorithms? So we actually have a couple of sort of explainer series. I've got one that's NLP for devs, which is sort of more high-level explanations of various NLP contexts. And then sorry, my mind is only saying Bova, and that's not his name. Vincent. Wow, more coffee. Vincent also has a series called The Algorithm Whiteboard, where he goes in like at a much lower level and talks about the various algorithms. So I would check out those videos if you are interested. And there's a 3-part series in Diet. That's what I was looking up a little bit earlier. All right. Anton says, there's an interesting hack in ML competitions when you try to select the random seed to increase your metric results. Black magic in ML is going to bite you in the butt. I'm going to tell you right now, it's a bad idea and you shouldn't do it. That's all I'll say there.
People do it. So
I know people do it. People do lots of things that don't end up working.
But yeah, if you want to win a competition, you can do it. If you want to create an algorithm that works, don't.
I'll also say the number one thing that gets people in, say, a machine learning competition where there's a hidden leaderboard that's the actual results is overfitting, and mining the random seed is very likely to produce overfitting for you. Just saying, wouldn't recommend it. Pesa says, how can I collect user input as yes or no to make a machine learning prediction? Assume I have 6 questions that the slot values are all yes or no. I'm facing a problem of one slot being filled by another. Since all 6 slots expect similar values, which is yes or no, how can we solve that issue?
Just create a form, and then the form can track what questions you asked. And therefore, you use the slot mapping that will fill your slot with intent rather than with an entity, and create 2 null data, affirm, deny intent, or yes, no intent, and all the possible ways how people can say yes or no. And then in the form, you create like question 1 from intent, yes, from value, from intent, no value, and then boo, 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 boo. And then the form should actually, this is precisely the use case where the form was designed for, so should work.
And do make sure that you have, like if you want to know, yes, no, I want, lettuce in my salad. Yes, no, I want tomatoes on my salad, or whatever it is. Lettuce, yes, no, should be a different slot than tomato, yes, no. I don't know if that's helpful for folks, but a mistake that seems very easy to make. Right. Ganesh says, can we have custom key value pairs similar to roles and groups when annotating entities?
You can if you create your own custom component. Like right now, it's not modified, but you can feel free to create a custom component, and you will have basically put whatever you want in it. So whatever classifier you can use, whatever classifier you want, and so on. Right now, it's roles and groups.
We actually talked a lot about what those names should be internally, so I hope that they are not confusing to you. All right. Yasmin says, can I use other languages in my pipeline? For example, Camembert, which is for French language, which is not supported by Rasa.
Again, I guess you need to create a custom component. I'm not sure if Camembert is supported in Hugging Face Transformer, but
I think it is.
I think it is. But then you may
double check that.
Then you probably need to create a custom language model featureizer, if I remember correctly, that would reuse the Camembert from Hugging Face Transformers.
And it is in Hugging Face. I just double checked, so we didn't say wrong things.
Perfect. Yeah. So yeah, just create a custom component, take our language model features as inspiration, or maybe even as a superclass. And maybe there is, I think there is some modification to tokenization needs to be performed, but not much.
Oh, this is just for transformers, but we do have a Hugging Face connector. It's not a connector. A way to use Hugging Face models.
Yeah, it's not really a connector. Yeah, it's a bit trickier than that, especially the tokenization in Hugging Face models. Yeah, so that's why it's hard to make in general.
So yes, you're going to have to do a little bit of futzing, but very possible. All right. Tuba says, I'm basing a user warning, found intent name in stories, not part of domain, although I've defined them in the domain. That sounds like it's probably a YAML syntax error, based on when I've gotten that error in the past. I might even run a YAML linter. It sounds like there might be maybe like a misplaced space or something in your domain file. Do you have a preferred YAML linter?
Or maybe a typo. It could be also a typo or.
It's possible. Yeah, so you could actually copy and paste into something like this, and it'll notice if you have any syntax errors. Yeah, help. All right. Ganesh says, is there a place where we can define business logic in Rasa? If so, how do we handle different sets of business logic for multi-tenant environments? I'm not entirely sure what you mean by business logic here. Do you have an idea, Bova?
And also, what do you mean by multi-tenant environment? But in principle, I would say that rules is a great place to do any sort of logic, right? So I would think about the thing that you think about what your bot does, because you're not sure, just like because that's how you want to respond. These stories, if there is something that you want to the bot like 100% always do, and you know the conditions for that, just create a rule snippet and can like condition it on different slot set. You can condition on different action, condition on maybe active loop or whatever form. And yeah, the rules. I would say the rules is the place for this.
Yeah, I would agree. And if you mean something that's not actually within the assistant, some sort of code that the assistant is triggering, perhaps in action, a custom action, and like you want, if a user is logged in as an admin, they get one custom action. If they're not, they get a different custom action. Then I'd say the action while is a good place to do that. More coffee. Yeah, I'm hoping that answers your question. If you want to like talk a little bit more what you mean by business logic, that's feel free to elaborate. Michelle says, hi. Hi.
Oh.
Faces says, well, one slot is being filled in a form, the other also gets autofilled when it sees a similar value. The problem is since all 6 slots are expecting a similar value. So this is for the form where you have a bunch of yes/no questions that you're answering. By business logic, oh, sorry, Faces says, how can we avoid autofilling the slot? Well, one is getting filled, the other is also getting autofilled for me before getting there.
So if you mean autofill by the entity extracted, then there is a, I think Rachel can take a look in the docs. You can turn off autofill for each entity or slot. I don't remember exactly for which. In the domain, you can provide autofill false or something like this. Don't remember the exact options. You can turn it off. But also, if you follow our idea that we proposed before to fill slot from intent, then it will not be autofilled anyhow because only entities can autofill slots.
Sorry, my my network is buckling under the strain right now. Autofill. Yeah. I think this is the one.
Hopefully.
NLU modifiers. To disable this behavior for a particular slot, you can set the autofill attribute to false in the domain file. So that would be here under the slot itself in the domain.
And then you will have to fill the slots either in your custom action or using the form.
So I think it makes sense to not do that. I think it makes sense to autofill something like if somebody's trying to rent a car, the make of car that they would prefer. But for something like this, where you might have the same, like the exact same text in multiple slots, I think it makes sense to turn off autofill.
Or use the trick of having different name for entity and the slot. Then it will be not autofilled by default. I mean, there is documentation in the forums. Please take a look in there because there are different slot metrics you can set up and so on. So sometimes, but in this particular case, I would just not use entities at all, right? So because yes and no and rather is rather an intent rather than an entity. Yeah. And just form and use the intent to fill it either in your custom slot or in your form with automatic slot
Mappings, here we go, is the section. So like instead of getting it from an entity, getting it from like just the text. Or you could use buttons. This might be a good place to use buttons if it's a visual interface.
Yeah, depends on the use case.
All right. Oh, so Ganesh is clarifying, by business logic, I mean that based on one utterance, one customer may choose to respond in one way. Another customer may want to capture more details and proceed in another way. Okay, so I think this is getting really back to what we were talking about with the dialogue manager and the way that it's very flexible.
I'm confused here. Who is the customer?
So I think the customer here is someone who is talking to the assistant.
Okay.
Is my guess here.
Yeah, but then you just need to create a story with different situations, intents, and then in that sense, yeah, this is exactly the case we discussed before. That's why you need dialogue training data.
Yeah, and if I've misinterpreted customer and you mean that, you know, you're trying to create 2 different assistants for 2 different people, I would have them have different code bases. And I don't think that's what you're asking, but like if I was, building an assistant for somebody and then somebody else had sort of like a similar use case, I might fork the first assistant, again, assuming licenses work, and then have them be separate. I don't know. Hopefully that's helpful.
Basically, if you have different customers build different bots, like this is, you can definitely commend that.
But it sounds like customers is someone who's talking to the assistant here.
Then it's the story or the rule, depending whether you know precisely the logic, then you use the rule. If you don't know the logic, if you just know that this is the conversation that I want my bot to do, like to behave, then use the story.
Yeah. So Magda, oh, and Ganesh clarifies, wow, sorry, I hope the mic didn't pick that up. The noise outside. By customer in my last message, I meant a business. Yeah, so if you're building something for two different businesses, yeah, I would have two different assistants. You might have some of this are similar looking, stories. So similar ways that people might want to use the assistant, and then as soon as possible, get it in front of test users, and then use what the test users do to continue to build and improve your assistant. So we have a lot of resources around conversational driven development, CDD, that sort of describes that process in more depth that you might find helpful. And I skipped right over Yasmin. Sorry, Yasmin. Who asks, when TED trains the data, does it use only stories, or does it also use rules? If we can create all scenarios with rules, oh, don't do that. Why would we use TED, which requires a lot of scenarios to predict the next action? That's a good question. And I can just right away tell you my gut reaction to rules. I would say rules are very powerful in a small handful of situations. I think actually if we go to the rules section, the first thing it says is don't overuse them. You can absolutely build a Rasa bot that only uses rules, doesn't use any sort of, machine learning dialogue manager. It will make your life very hard down the line. But you can do it. I wouldn't recommend it. Do you want to expand on that, Fopa?
Yeah, so basically TED trains only on stories. Rules is handled by rule policy. And what Rachel says, yes, you can create all the rules, and it depends on your use case, right? So if you have a very simple bot and your rules look very simple, fits on one screen, perfect. If you start to notice that rules are so convoluted, like they start to become to depend on each other, and it's and if you yourself notice that you do not grasp it anymore, like you look at the rules files, and then you imagine station, you don't know how your bot will behave, I would recommend this as an indicator. You need stories, because rules are meant to cover the basics and are meant to cover the things that you always know bot should execute, and are always meant to also help you to keep your bot in your own mind, right? Because with stories it's really hard. With rules, there are simple rule snippets, so if you can imagine how your bot behaves, then you're probably still good. If you start to find it hard to grasp it, you need to use stories. And this is exactly the same argument between state machine and rules, because the more you use rules, the more state machine-like bot you create. And that means that you simplify your life, make it complex later. And this is, there is no measure for it, unfortunately. It's just from the experience of using them, I can tell you that. And also the handoff rule, the thing that I use is when deciding rules or stories is how simple your conditions